As we have seen, Administrator Fugate, as we've seen almost unprecedented string of weather-related disasters across the country this spring, the communities and families who have been impacted will undoubtedly look to FEMA, as they already have, for timely services and assistance to help them get them back on their feet. It's a significant responsibility that you have. And as the Disaster Assistance Fund is further depleted, it's going to force you to make some very difficult decisions. Congress needs to do its job, and it needs to get you the funding it needs. There is no doubt about that, but the cost of those disasters will continue to mount, and there's a lot of folks out there that are in need. I have several questions, and you can answer them in any order you want. Can you provide us with an update on the current disaster relief fund shortfall? And does the recently passed House Homeland Security Appropriations Bill even come close to providing what you need? Is my understanding it's at least $1 billion short.
In the current fiscal year, we are watching very closely the obligations for the most recent disasters. Prior to the most recent flooding and tornadoes, we were projecting that we would remain above $1 billion to the end of the fiscal year and not have to implement immediate needs funding. But with the more recent disasters and the fact that we do not have completed damage assessments, we are continuing to assess that very closely to see if the public assistance and requirements to support the initial response would require us to do immediate needs funding. As to the FY12, again, this goes back to something the chair lady basically touched on, and that is the philosophical way of funding disasters. Do we do that through full appropriations, or do we look at that, particularly in the older disasters that were extreme events that go beyond what we have historically budgeted for, do we use another tool? And I think that is a question that there's a lot of discussion. How do we address the older disasters, as well as should we be budgeting at a continuation level of disasters we expect to get and treat these as extraordinary events, or do we look at that as a budget issue that we would look at in our baseline funding request?
Okay, you know what the needs are out there. The question I really had was, does the House-passed budget come close to meeting your needs?
For FY12, sir, the answer probably is going to come back to, given what we had projected on closing out disasters and putting money back into the DRF, we were still looking at when we would require immediate needs funding for 12. I don't have a time frame on that. And with these most recent disasters, all of that projection, I think, has got to go back to what are we going to be dealing with this summer.
Okay. Well, you got 36 states on the map, according to Senator Coates. He's got 37, I got 38, and God knows what else is out there. You're the guy on the ground. You're the guy that the Senate and the House, I think, looks to make sure that there's adequate funding out there, because you know as well as I do, I ask things of you as a senator from Montana on behalf of Montanans. Senator Coates, Senator Landrieu will do the same thing. It's not unlike any other budget. You got to tell us. Is it adequate or is it not?
Senator, for this year, we got to add up the damages to see if we're going to have to go in the immediate needs for 12. The continued practice of this administration and previous administrations has asked for a baseline budget based upon a level of existing disasters that does not always factor in existing catastrophic disasters. But the other part of that is looking at how much of that we're going to need for the 12 budget.
I got you. I don't want to beat you up too bad.
Good line of question.
But the question is, you know, as I look at this map, and as you proposed the budget, because you were around for this budget that was proposed, did you anticipate the kind of emergency situations that were going to arise? I mean, I'm looking at a map that's primarily green, and green isn't a good color in this case.
No, this year's been rather exceptional. But I'd also point out that although you have many states that are green, many of those states are actually operating under what we call fire management assistance grants, so they don't have a large-scale event like a hurricane or some other large outbreak. Many of these disasters, as unfortunate as they are, have been very focused. I think the chairwoman would recognize that when you get a hurricane, they're so much larger. I mean, again, as bad as the devastation as an example in Joplin, the public infrastructure losses will probably be primary debris. We only had a couple of public buildings damaged, unlike we would see in an earthquake or hurricane. So Again, although you have a lot of states colored, it is not always going to be to the same level we see in these more catastrophic events.
Look, none of us in this panel want to spend money that doesn't have to be spent, but by the same token, when I flow over southern Montana and see the roads and the bridges that are out, and I have northern Montana just getting hit this week. I mean, we've got Roundup that's going to be flooded again. Well, it probably is already flooded right now. We got a levee in Glasgow that's about to be breached, if it isn't breached right now, in the Missouri River. Affected communities, and I'm going to shut her down. Okay. Affected communities, the representatives of those affected communities, what can they do to best ensure that they're in a proper position to receive the assistance that they need in a timely manner?
Well, the most important thing is, again, once a governor's requested a disaster declaration, not every disaster warrants a Stafford Act declaration. We do say no. That is a fact of life. But where we have, where the president has declared that disaster, the important things are, again, to get their documentation, work with the state and with FEMA to get their claims in that are eligible and process those quickly. There's a lot of work on the initial end of these responses. As we get into the out years, things can slow down. And I think it's important that as quickly as we can identify what the total cost impacts will be, the better we can assess where the DRF is and whether there would be a shortfall requiring any immediate needs funding restrictions.
I appreciate that, and I thank the chair for their
Thank you, and I'll call the committee's attention to the chart that is being put up that gets to the heart of what Senator Tester was asking. The president has requested 1.8 in the baseline for 12, but your estimate, your low estimate is 3.8, and your high estimate is 6.6. So there is quite a delta that we're going to have to fix to attend to the needs that the senator from Montana was raising.